right. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Grazy podcast. This is your host, Grace.
And Emma.
So today we have a long-awaited episode all about dating and relationships and how that might correlate to astrology. It's really interesting because all three of us are guests and our hosts were all based in New York City. Of course, we've been to other countries. Today's guest is New York City's prominent content creator, Dasom Lee. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Dasom. I'm a NYC lifestyle and travel blogger based in Manhattan. Actually, no longer Manhattan, but close by. And yeah, I'm a 25-year-old New Yorker, aspiring globetrotter, and very, very experienced dating connoisseur. So I'm excited to unpack all of my many dating experiences. There are so many characters in New York City, and I'm also really into the psychology of dating, and I'm excited to learn more about the astrology behind it as well.
Amazing. Emma, what are you going to talk about astrology and relationships today?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit more about how astrology relates to relationships regarding compatibility or certain placements that you might want to look for when you're assessing, compatibility for a potential partner. We'll get into it more when we get to the astrology aspect, but things about finding your match and what that might look like are probably things that'll come up.
Awesome. So, okay, how do we even dive into this? Because I have my questions, but I want Tassom to kind of because you gave us the idea for this episode. What was it specifically that popped up in your head?
I think there's something so interesting about dating in a highly competitive, in a way, high stakes environment because the New York City lifestyle is so fast paced. People are traveling, their careers are accelerating at like rocket speeds. And so the criteria that they have for, just a brief interaction, so having a good time like on an evening out versus life partner is like so wildly contrasting. And so I find that it's interesting because it's easy to misalign on what you're looking for originally. But then as time goes on, there's, these uncontrollable variables of chemistry and physical interests and personalities, like just like synergizing in a really somewhat magical way that makes you want to continue seeing that person. So I think there's two aspects here. There's a logical aspect and the emotional aspect. And it's interesting to see how the emotional aspect can be, in a way, like predestined by astrology and your compatibilities in terms of zodiac sign.
Wow. So you mean logical, emotional, like logical, like the person you want to marry kind of thing?
Yes, like logical, as in this person fits into my life in a very practical manner, and they would be someone I could have around for like value add, because New Yorkers are looking to like optimize their lifestyles, whereas emotional is more so I feel it in my heart and I'm trusting my intuition that there is something like deeper here in terms of connection.
So I guess I want to get into the first phases of New York City specifically. How was New York City dating for all of us compared to other cities that you guys lived in?
I'm from Texas, where the men are very hospitable and very much gentlemanly manners. There's a lot of, oh, I'm going to pick you up in my truck and take you out and treat you. Yes, they drive trucks in Texas for real. No horses though, thank God. But the issue is that it's a little more serious, and men are looking for like domestic housewives, a lot of them, people to build families with. It's a lot about, oh, like we are going to stay in Texas, not really venture outside. Whereas New York is all about that sense of adventure, spontaneity, like that kind of intelligence that draws one another. So it's never about, oh, let's do a traditional like dinner date. It's like, let's have fun, let's go experience something new together. It's very different. And in Texas, things move much slower. So you might see someone a few times a month. It might get a little serious faster. Whereas in New York, you'll see them like 3 times a week, and it'll take 3 times the length of time to get serious because that commitment part is a little bit unavailable in New York City. Whereas Texas is a lot more like, I know what I want and I'm looking for like more long-term intention.
Do you think that is still the case in 2024 in Texas and like the southern kind of countries?
The more southern the culture of the region, the more old-fashioned it is. If you go to a city like Austin, where it's liberal and there are a lot of college students and young people, and actually a lot of tech entrepreneurs that are accumulating from the Bay or New York in Austin because, tax purposes. So I think in those scenarios, it's becoming more modernized, but Southern hospitality still exists in the less urbanized, less metropolitan areas of Texas where there are still farms and small towns and people don't necessarily move into this small town, they've just been there for a while.
Wow. Maybe I need to move there.
So most of my dating experiences have been in New York, um, split between upstate New York and the city here in New York City, as well as like the Bay Area. I lived out there for a year and a half at some point. I wasn't really big into dating out there, but I went on a few dates. And I definitely can relate to what Dasom was saying about this sense of adventure and spontaneity in New York that you might find here, but not in more rural or suburban areas, sort of thing. I definitely noticed that dating upstate when I was in college or, kind of just post grad, um, most people that I was around were actually from New York who had been up there for school. So there was that same sense of spontaneity and adventure, and my career is coming first. So I'm looking for something more casual or just looking for a good time. That's not to say that, of course, you can't find people looking for a serious relationship, but I did notice that pattern and tendency sort of exist upstate as well as here in the city. I've had the same experience here in the city where it can take a little bit of time, despite being so close to people or seeing them so often, to maybe reach that goal of being in a committed relationship. But I do think that a lot of it is very individual, and what you're looking for is out there. Um, and sometimes it's just more a question of like compatibility and are we looking for the same things and was that communicated right up front, because if not, then here you are 2 months later still dating somebody, realizing only then that you're on different pages, which I'm sure is a different conversation. But yeah, when I went to San Francisco though, it's I would say it was pretty similar. My personal experience, and I know that maybe not everybody had this experience, is that there were a lot of like wealthy people in San Francisco. And I noticed that a lot of those people were the ones that were taking interest in like wanting to take me on a date, for example. And a lot of the courting, if you will, was I don't want to say materialistic in nature, but it was a little bit more materialistic in nature. It's let me take you to the nicest spot. Let me pick you up in like this car instead of this car. And, there is an element of like, how does this look to other people that was involved there? Again, I'm not saying that everybody's experience is going to be like that, but it's just something that I noticed and I found it really interesting.
I should move there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's funny.
Did you
Yeah.
enjoy that courting process with like
Mm, I did and I didn't. I think, of course, it's nice to meet somebody who feels no qualms about treating you in that way, right? Who believes that, yeah, this person is worth taking out to like a nice restaurant. But I think for me, for example, one of the things that ended up happening was I had went on a date with someone and really, really wonderful person, by the way. This is not a slight against him as a person. Very materialistic in nature. And it became very clear to me, though, after the second date that I went on with him, that he had very particular expectations about like how his relationship was going to unfold down to like the timeline of it, right? I want to be married within X number of months, X number of years. Within that time frame, I will buy like this is just an example, right? Like I'll buy a house and you're going to live there and you're going to have my kids and that's going to be what your life is. And so that doesn't really work for me, at least, especially at the time that I was at in my life. I'm young. I'm trying to understand who I am and what I want for my life. That became more of the problem, was an incompatibility there in terms of what we both desire for our future. But I mean, sure. I mean, it's nice to be taken to like these nice spots, to go to these beautiful restaurants and sit in nice cars, I suppose. But I think for me, realistically, I look for other things when it comes to whether or not somebody is a good match for me. But yeah.
for me, I don't have a lot of dating experience in New York City. I've been in one meetings with people, so I can't really say I had a relationship in America. but my experiences were mostly in Korea. And the Korean dating experience is interesting because it's like the opposite. They will ask you to be a girlfriend within like three meetups or 3 dates, 2, 3 dates. So you guys become boyfriend and girlfriends, but I feel like that kind of burns out really fast. There's a lot of love bombing because it's like, be my girlfriend, boyfriend. All of a sudden it's really hot, and then a month later they ghost you. So it's kind of like the opposite over there. And it's really confusing when it comes to love in Korea. So in New York, I don't have much to say, but I know that you guys said that's more the opposite, where it takes longer to become exclusive, but you do everything like you're dating. So my point is, in my life, I'm very confused. I don't know. I'm trying to refigure what partnership is. So that's where I'm at.
I was gonna ask you eventually, like, what have you come to? You're currently redefining what partnership looks like. What have you come to so far?
So, as you guys know, I feel like recently I went through like a very big heartbreak. So I'm thinking like, well, maybe like romantic partnerships don't last. Like romantic relationships, in my personal view in life, is maybe it's different for other people. I know like some doctors and psychologists says that like romantic feelings, like biologically only last like 3 years or something like that in humans. And then it changes to like different chemistry. So I'm thinking if it doesn't last anyway, well, maybe for me, marriage or partnership is more like business where I need to meet, like you said, Tassom, like logically who fits into my life and what can we benefit with each other in terms of finances, in terms of our goals, maybe kids, maybe ABCD is what I want and ABCD is what they want and I can provide for them. So it's almost like a business transaction. So I've came to this thought, maybe I want relationships to be more business rather than feeling emotional because that just leads to heartbreaks in my experience. Maybe someone will come into my life and change my thoughts. I don't know, but that's kind of where I am with partnerships.
I can attest to this feeling of, oh, like when you're heartbroken or experience something painful, you want to protect yourself from it by removing those emotions. But I do think that at the end of the day, those will go hand in hand. Like the person that caters to your life is also going to feel emotionally safe and secure to you because they are supportive in those ways. I do think the main lesson I've learned is to vet initially for like the very important logical aspects that they need to fit, and then hope that the emotional part comes in. And if it doesn't, then it is not worth your time because an emotional connection is essentially what's going to provide the most value in terms of your happiness, productivity, and well-being. So yeah, but the logical part, it's important to prioritize, but not see as the ultimate end all be all, because the emotional part will sustain you in the long run, I believe.
I agree. I agree. I think that instead of like you said, for me now going through emotionally first, like I want to see it logically and then allow the emotions to become the base and the attachment instead of the movie like Disney fantasy. Oh my God, I fell in love with this prince from the first sight. I don't know if I believe that will happen in my life. I don't know. I don't know where I am, guys.
Love is confusing. It's okay. Everyone navigates it and no one is perfect at it. And I think that's the universal human experience and the comfort that we all have. And everyone experiences pain and suffering through love and also the greatest joys.
I want to ask you guys, I know we go into the modern dating where it's a lot of situationships, a lot of like, let me try to up this person. And it kind of like became a game. I'm not sure if it's just New York City or the Gen Z, the modern dating world. What do you guys think is the difference between our parents' generations who seems to have a longer relationships compared to today?
They really, really just like decided to latch on to someone that they love, like initially loved and saw rationally being together with, and they just stuck through it, like through every challenge, every hardship. Modern dating is like, if you don't serve me, I'm going to leave. Like it's very conditional sometimes, very quick decision making. So that's the main difference that I see. I think Gen Z and especially the world of social media allows you to compare and contrast your relationship with others and see what else is out there and available to you. But in the past, like there was no point of comparison. So our parents are just very loyal in that way, like maybe resentful because they don't have a way out. But in this era, you have to be very intentional and like choose your partner every day because you do have other options.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I always thought that our parents' generation had this like they met their love of their life. Like they had that era, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they found somebody, one person or the second person that they met when they were young that seems to be like, okay, like I can live with this person. And they grew into love and into family rather than us thinking that, oh my God, they were the love of our lives. And back then, like you said, they had to stick through the challenges. Like getting divorced in Korea is very taboo. So no matter what, they had to do it. No, no questions asked. But today, like you said, we have so much options. We don't have to stick through the difficult challenges. Like we want to be a bit in more comfort zone. So I feel like again, like the true love, I don't know if that really exists to our parents. I think it's just the fact that you were conditioned to stay and through no matter what. So today I feel like that would be possible as well, but would that person we choose really be the love of our lives or just somebody that we decided to stick through the difficult times? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have similar thoughts that you both have. It's almost like there's two opposite sides of a coin happening with like the older generations of, like you've said, staying committed to something and there being longevity there. But is there really love and passion and all these other things? Or is it just something that happened out of convenience or out of expectation, even societal expectation? Grace, you make a really good point about divorce in Korea, but I think in general, even thinking about my parents' generation and grandparents, there is a lot of shame also in divorcing. There's a lot of, it's a big no-no, like you said. And I think we've moved into a time where, yes, social media is absolutely playing into this, but we're big into this like personal empowerment movement, right? All about reclaiming your own power and what is it that you want for your life and who are you and yada, yada, yada. And I think that that's really important to find and discover those things for yourself. But I do think it can lend its hand to what that someone just said about, oh, if this person doesn't serve me, I'm good, I'm done with them. And it's like, well, sometimes getting to know somebody and getting to understand how you work with another person takes time, actually. And some things are not always going to be that like sparks flying right off the bat, everything is perfect. I actually think sometimes that could actually be more of like a sign that things maybe aren't exactly what you are perceiving them to be, being kind of caught up in that illusion. But yeah, I totally resonate with what you guys are saying for sure.
Yeah, like if your parents were our age now in 2024, would they marry each other? Would they
Right.
stick together? I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I want to get into dating apps. Do you think there is a pro and a con to this, and have they ruined the dating industry or the world, or have they improved it?
Dating apps are incredible at creating very, very superficial layering to your selection process. Dating apps, I think, are efficient and they're as productive as scrolling through an online shop for that perfect dress for your graduation. It is elusive because you see that dress worn on like a model that is meant to be ideal for picture purposes, and you kind of start to buy into this fantasy of I could have this life with someone in a way that they curated. So they're going to show you their hobbies, their best profile like photos. They're going to, in a way jazz up their possible value as an individual you could date. I think that dating apps gives you this illusion that there are so many endless options, which is why people think the grass is greener elsewhere in New York City, especially. But at least it allows you to meet people with similar intentions quite quickly and in a pretty repetitive, fast manner. So I find that it's great to get past all the people who aren't necessarily interested in dating. But when it comes to expectations and not meeting them, it's so variable. It's really hard to judge someone by a photo. It creates confusion and also optionality. So I think it's a double-edged sword at the end of the day.
Yeah, I haven't really used dating apps much, really, actually, at all. But um, I think the way that you just described that was really, really accurate and really interesting too. Um, it reminds me a bit of when you apply for a job and they have like LinkedIn profiles or like, these other profiles that you have to set up in order to even send an application. And I think there is a layer of superficiality there. It goes kind of like skin deep, and I'm not discounting the fact that it can be, it can lead you to, maybe, I don't want to say weed out, but like weed out certain people that aren't even there for the same reasons maybe that you are. But I don't know. I personally am somebody who doesn't prefer online dating or app dating, but I understand the draw of it for sure. If that makes sense.
Emma, when was the last time you were on the app and have you met somebody like one on one?
The last time I was on a dating app was when I was in college. When I was in college,
Oh.
one of my roommates made, she's so sweet, but she made me a Tinder profile. This is when Tinder was like a hot thing, I guess. And yeah, I met up with a couple people on it. Actually, one of my friends, one of like somebody that ended up becoming a pretty good friend of mine, actually, I met through Tinder. We never were in a relationship or anything, but it was really nice. I think that was kind of the other thing that I ended up realizing with dating apps is that sometimes you meet people and it doesn't really work out romantically for whatever reason, but you can still have friendships with these people or develop some type of connection with somebody if you both so choose, of course. um, but yeah, what about you?
I'm starting to think that dating apps is really not for me because I feel like every one of them that I've met in person, they look so different in photos and in real life. Like the height, the thing that you create in your head, the fantasy of what they might look like is just so different. And it just, in a way, it's more psychology where it's better to be wowed than disappointed. So it's better in a way to not like their photos and be in person, be like, oh my God, whoa. Than the opposite because you go into it expecting something. If you're disappointed, like even if they might be a great person, you're like, no. And like Tassum said, it's more like cutting it off really quickly. And it's just so hard to tell their personality, everything through photos. And it just takes so much energy to meet the person and then nicely decline it after a couple days. So it just takes so much energy out of me. But how else do you meet people? So that's kind of the pros there where you have a lot of options and you can go out and meet new people. But a lot of the times I feel like the men maybe aren't looking for friends. Maybe for the females we might feel like we could stay friends, but a lot of
Yeah.
them just really want like a woman.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree that most men are not looking for friends, and I wouldn't even say that most women are looking for friends necessarily because these men serve a purpose, and once they no longer give you the attention and the resources that they have, then to offer their potential partner, it's like they lose their value, in my opinion. I will say with anything in life, I think dating apps is a learning curve. My friends that have said that they didn't enjoy it, it's because they're new to it and it's like a new experience, you know? Like kind of like someone who posts a social media Instagram post for the first time and they're like, "Oh, I don't enjoy editing. I don't enjoy, creating content." But then over time, like it becomes easier and it becomes proficient and they become proficient in that. So I see it as a numbers game. Like actually like my most successful the people that I've seen most successful on dating apps are like the serial daters who just happen to, be able to get through a lot of people at once. And in doing so, they burn less energy through repetition. And then they also weed out like the best individuals. Like it's interesting, but it's definitely not an easy experience. And I think that's why um it's something you have to in a way like hone as a skill because the better you get at it, the better your chances are. Whereas the chances of meeting like someone that you really enjoy and like match with, it's like pure luck. So the people that are wanting to like get more control into their lives and in terms of like who they date, dating apps are good for that. It just requires energy and effort, like you said.
So do you think you've seen a lot of friends who've actually got into marriage or like relationships through dating apps? Like, what's a success rate, do you think?
Yeah, huge success rate. I think almost like all of my friends who are in long-term relationships, dating apps, or marriages have met through a date. Sorry. Most of my friends who are in long-term relationships or marriages have met through a dating app, or a friend of a friend. But most of them have met through dating apps. And it's interesting because it only takes one. Like you don't need like 10 ideal partners, you just need one. So it's like at some point you're going to get there. And I think that's what happened to most of my friends, especially in Texas. People have really, really high success rates in Texas because most of them are looking for the same thing, I think.
Mm. I think we covered this, which was situationships versus relationships. Do we need to touch on that?
I mean, it just works differently in New York. I think in New York City, a lot of people say that they uh, are surprised by the existence of a situationship phase. That means you're exclusive but not in a relationship. And then being relation in a relationship, like boyfriend girlfriend officially, is like seen as like such a bigger endeavor, bigger label, a much more serious commitment. Whereas in other states like Colorado, Florida, Texas, Washington, like you will definitely just see people jump into the relationship stage and skip the exclusivity stage. But in New York, there's so much optionality that you need that exclusivity stage to mark the fact that you're not seeing other people because it is so easy to do so.
So if situationships are so kind of prominent, at least where we are, what do you guys want? Like, do you think most people these days want situationships, or do they just want to like have fun, or do they really want love?
Hold on, sorry. There are like several questions in there that I'm trying to figure out which one to answer first. But I've noticed one thing. One thing I've noticed about just people in New York and situationships, even some of the clients that I've taken, I it's not so much that people want situationships, like they actively are seeking out a situationship, but more so that like a lot of people want, and I don't mean this like judgmentally at all because I'm sure we've all been there. They want like the benefits of a relationship without having to make that commitment that a relationship would entail. That's not everybody, by the way. I'm just saying I've noticed this pattern come up a lot with my friends, with my clients, even certain situations that I've been in. I'm like, this doesn't seem like what I'm looking for, you know? I think there's nothing wrong though with, say, unconventional relationships. And if you would like to have some type of unconventional arrangement, who is who has the right to stop you, right? Nobody has the right to tell you how to live your life. It's more about, are the two of you on the same page about that? And I find that a lot of times situationships arise from a lack of whether it's communication or just understanding or acceptance of the fact that you two are on different pages, but there's something keeping you wanting to still see somebody and connect with that person, despite perhaps knowing that that person is not on the same page as you. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's just one thing that really comes like straight to the front of my mind when you ask that, is like I've just noticed that pattern play out a lot around the
You put
system.
it like perfectly.
Mm.
For me, like it's never felt good to be in a situationship. It's never good to not know where you are at. I don't like confusion. Maybe some people like that, like the drive and like the excitement. For me, I guess I don't personally like not knowing where I am with that person.
I think the main draw to situationships is that people are looking for love without the hardship. And there's something almost protecting you from heartbreak when there's no serious label or serious expectation on where this can lead. So at the end of the day, I think everyone is looking for love, they're looking for chemistry, they're looking for passion, and they're looking for partnership. All of that is glued together into this very emotional yet logical desire to have a significant other. But when that manifests in a serious commitment, it leads to technicalities being brought into the picture. Like, do our friends get along? Do our families get along? Do our future goals get along? And when you're in your 20s, you're still navigating what you want for your future. There's so many what ifs and career shifts that are happening. Generation Z is very non-committal in terms of career path, company, and even profession. So it's interesting how when you have so many uncertainties in your life, adding someone else and their uncertainties into the picture takes away from the fun part of love, which is this free-flowing energy exchange. So I think that's why situationships are appealing to people in their youth, even people that have gotten freshly out of a divorce and are middle aged. Like they don't know if they want to be married again or have kids again, like in their 40s and 50s. So they'll opt for this situationship phase. And it is just a coping mechanism I think our society has developed because of the volatility of our current age and all the different opportunities that flattening the world through technology and media has also provided us. So it is something that serves its purpose. Is it fun? Sometimes, but most of the time it will lead to confusion. But people just want to hold on to that like love feeling so badly, so desperately that they're not willing to give it up.
One of my question was, what do you guys think about self-love and self-care, which seems to be a big topic on social media when it comes to relationship? Is it really helpful thing or just a mask or an excuse, like a coping mechanism for us to protect ourselves and not be in a relationship?
I think that the self love, self empowerment movement is valuable. I think that to what Dasom just said about, situationships and the prominence of them amongst young people, think about it, right? When you're young, you are discovering who you are. Same thing for what she said about, people who are recently divorced. You're recently divorced. Do you want to get into another marriage again? I don't know. Who are you now that you're not married, right? What has changed for you now that you're not married? Young people, we're all still trying to understand who we are, what it looks like to care for ourselves, what is, our self-proclaimed identity, all these things. And so when you try to get into a relationship with somebody, before you really understand what that is for yourself, what are your values, what are you looking for in a person, if you don't even really understand a lot of that for yourself, it's going to, I think, potentially increase the number of situationships that you could find yourself in over, say, a committed relationship. Um, so I do think that in a way, this self-care, self-love thing can be beneficial in that it can help you to actually discover more about who you are, right? It can give you an opportunity to take care of yourself and see, like, how do I like to be nurtured? And then when you meet somebody else, like, how does that fit in with my life, right? For example, right? This is just on a general level. But I do think you make a good point, right? That at times, though, especially American culture, there's a lot of like hyper independent type of energy that we push out into the world, especially in large cities like LA, New York, you name it, right? So I do think that it can be an excuse, especially for people who, by psychology's terms, have more of a avoidant attachment style. They may be more prone to like finding reasons to push people away, and one of them being something that allows them to claim more independence or control over their circumstances, which could manifest as something like, oh, I'm just in a phase of like loving myself and being independent and da da da. After one of my last relationships ended, I can actually kind of attest to this. I was single for like 3 years, and I initially told myself, like, I'm intentionally single right now because I need to really understand what is going on for me, my internal experience. I need to heal from this situation. And that was true. But after, I would say, like a year and a half, I started to feel like every time I would say, like, oh, I'm intentionally single, it started to feel more like a way to avoid connection than it did to actually represent how I was feeling. So then I had to start looking and reflecting inward, you know, and I ended up realizing that part of the reason that I was doing that is, again, a protective mechanism from being hurt in the past. I'm like, oh, well, if you just keep things far away from you, then you don't run the risk of getting hurt. But by that same token, you don't have a filter in that wall. So when you put up a wall to keep things out, you also prevent the right things from coming in to meet you, to find you. So, yeah, I think yes. The answer to your question that I would say is yes, that it can be a cover at times, or a way to, if you will, self-sabotage from meeting connections and meeting people, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, Grace? I'm curious.
I think there's pro and cons to everything in life, but in terms of this, I think there's more pros because if I think about my parents, they got married not necessarily super young, but they didn't have that self-care era back in the days. So I feel like in that case, you can extrude, I don't know if that's the word, but point out a lot of your flaws to your kids, giving them trauma, a lot of like my parents would yell at me at the smallest thing. I personally look at myself and be like, I would never do that because I grew a lot and know who I am. But I feel like our parents' generation just did it out of
Just frustration and anger for their circumstance.
yes. And like just because marriage and having kids was like the norm at this age, and it's just a stage in life without really discovering who they are and fulfilling their life. I don't think my mom and my dad did everything they wanted to when they were young. So I think that could come out as frustration, like you said, to your kids. And I think my mom had a very hard time when she was going through menopause, or maybe postpartum stress. Maybe that all could relate to the fact that you're trying to rediscover yourself again. So I think I want to fulfill as much as I can before I have kids. And I want to give them the love that I have within me. Since it's already full and it's already like a full cup I could give them. So self love, I think, is super important. And let's say you don't find a love, I can't control that. If that was meant to be. So I want to be able to still be okay with being with myself, even if that was destined for you to not have a relationship.
Yeah. I think statistically speaking, most people in the world do get married and end up having kids, or at least find one partner that they connect with deeply in their lives. So I think self-love actually sets you up for success in a relationship because you're no longer seeking someone to fill up that empty part of you, but someone to supplement your life in a positive, healthy, non-toxic, non-codependent manner. So I think self-love and self-care is extremely important because it allows you to prioritize your well-being and fill your own cup before you fill anyone else's, which is a much more altruistic and happy end result. So it is for people that are also in relationships. I think the fact that you're in a relationship means that you should prioritize yourself even more because that's when you get lost in the other person. And it's something I'm navigating right now too, as like I'm like dating and starting to like find people that I enjoy being with. Spending too much time with them takes away from your own individual interests. So finding that autonomy is like so important in the beginning stages of a relationship as well.
I know Tassum has to go in 5 minutes, so I wanted to ask Emma, is there anything you can give us with astrology, dating, how to find the right match, maybe in our charts?
Yeah, so with astrology, it's interesting because I find that there are several different things that can really play into astrological relationship compatibility, if you will. When we look at planets, there's things like Mars, for example. I know we've had this discussion about like logic versus emotion in connection, and I think that there is like like some truth and reality to that. In astrology, you have things like the moon, which represent your emotional needs, like what you need to feel emotionally nurtured. Like there's a very emotional, tender component to the moon. But then you also have the placement like Mars, which is about desire and sex and passion. You have Venus, which is about reciprocal 3D, if you will, love. It's the idea of like balanced give and take, right? Reciprocity in relationships, very tangible, like third dimension. But then you also have Neptune, which is more of this 5D element of unconditional love, right? It's the higher octave of Venus. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about relationships, we have this discussion, even within this discussion, there is an element of all of those things that we touched on in some form. So the sign that each of those placements falls in will tell you, the strategy through which you embody those energies. But that's kind of general. So to get, I guess, a little bit more detail into it, I always find that like one of the common misconceptions with astrology is, oh, this person's sun sign is not compatible with my sun sign, so it means that we're not gonna work out. I actually don't think that that's always the most important thing. I think like if we're looking at individual placements, looking at things like the moon and Venus might actually be more helpful to tell you whether or not there is some type of synergy, I suppose, in the way that you connect. Because again, like I said, the moon represents your unconscious needs and desires, your emotions, and Venus represents how you like to give and receive love. It represents what you value as well. And so when you think about a relationship, like yes, there is an element of emotion and connection that you want to have there, but there is also this very practical lens that Dasom has mentioned several times. Do we even share the same values? Like, how does this person fit into my life in a very practical way? So I think those two things are really important to look at. And then the only other thing that I would say might be worth looking into is it's called overlays, which means when you look at two charts together, you get to see where the other person's planets fall in your chart, like what houses they fall in. That can, I think that can even be more telling, perhaps, about compatibility or the way that you might feel around somebody. Um, so yeah, those are the things that I would say you might want to look at when assessing some type of like compatibility. But by the way, one more thing I did want to say is that your chart will always be overridden by your level of maturity. So you could have the most compatible two charts together, but if you have two people that don't know how to communicate, for example, or are still really living in their shadow and they're very aggressive with one another and like, whatever, then the chart can be great and super compatible, but you might not actually harness like the full potential of that chart because both of you are still, or one of you, whatever, is still, maturing in a way. So I just wanted to make that really, really clear. The chart is not like an end all be all.
So, do you have any questions for like dating and astrology?
When it comes to feminine masculine dynamics, does astrology promote like females being in their feminine like peacefulness and male dominance kind of taking over and leading the charge? Or can the roles be reversed if your charts say otherwise?
Wow, I actually really love this question because I think the way that things are right now, there's a lot of talk about feminine masculine polarity and how, like, if you are a woman and you want to attract a man, you have to be in your feminine, you can't be in your masculine at all, this and that. I think that there is, yes, there is masculine and masculinity and femininity are things to be considered, but I think that astrology can actually show you that, like, all of us have masculine and feminine sides to us. And there are situations in which you might meet a woman who has more masculine energy and a man who has more feminine energy. And I think at the end of the day, astrology will, I don't want to say promote, but it will promote you being what is most authentically you. So, for example, I happen to be a woman, but dominantly in my chart is masculine energy, fire and air all over the place. There's not really a lot of anything else. So, I do naturally have a tendency to operate a little bit more from a masculine frame. Does it affect like dating? Yes, probably. But that's something that like I have to then become aware of and then do whatever I need to do to adjust that to a point where like I feel comfortable. I think the other thing too that astrology can show you is that people have different preferences for different things. There are men that I've met who are dominant in like water and earth energy, which is feminine energy in astrology, but they have, say, a Venus in a masculine sign. So they actually are attracted to women who are a little bit more masculine. Not to the point where a woman is now taking on a role that she doesn't want to be taking on, but they like that. They like someone who's outspoken, who's opinionated, who's yada yada yada. Whereas traditionally, based on masculinity and femininity, people may say that oh, women are supposed to be in their feminine, which means they're not really pursuing things. They're not outspoken. They're not opinionated. I know it's a little bit more old fashioned, but um, yeah, I think astrology can actually kind of just show you that like masculinity and femininity exist in all of us, and it's about finding the balance that works for you. I think internally, um, that will set you up for the success that you're looking for. Because everybody's meter for what is appropriately feminine or appropriately masculine is going to be really different. Like I know people who see a certain girl as like, oh wow, she's way too masculine, but then I know other people that will look at that same girl and be like, oh man, like she's like pretty girly, you know? Like sure, they probably have different criteria based on what they're using to define that. Um, but yeah, I actually think astrology could somewhat like break apart this notion that masculinity and femininity are only like there's only one way that you could be. If
Dasom, do you know your moon sign?
I think you're
So,
right.
My moon is in Cancer and my rising is Taurus, but I'm an Aries.
Mhm.
oh, you're an Aries. So, does that mean you have to look for the Cancer men? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is if she has moon in Cancer, it means that she feels potentially very nurtured by like Cancerian type of things, and or the way that she relates to emotion is in a very Cancerian way. Cancer is like very emotional. It's an emotional sign. It's extremely intuitive. It values like safety in relationships in terms of like emotional safety. She's an Aries, so there is a side of you that's very probably adventurous that likes to experience different things and doesn't like to stay in one place for too long. But Moon in Cancer does kind of ground you a little bit more into that desire for something maybe more like long lasting or reliable, emotionally available. So what it means is like she doesn't necessarily need to look for Cancer men. It's just that people who embody the qualities of Cancer may play very nicely with her moon sign and make her feel very emotionally nurtured or very emotionally understood. Um, but it's not like a like you have to look for that. I don't know what your Venus sign is in, but that's like another thing too to look at. Say for example that you had Venus in Gemini. You don't have to look only for Gemini individuals, of course. It just means that people who carry Gemini energy might activate her Venus placement in a way that's like exciting, that ignites Venus energy for you. But bear in mind that like every sign has a shadow or a disempowered expression. So that can also be something, for example, that you might stumble upon. As you could give an example, right? Sagittarius, when it's operating from its empowered expression, is very wise. It's adventurous. It's spontaneous. It's philosophical. But when it's operating from its shadow, it can be judgmental. It can be a little bit, I don't want to say stubborn, but I guess stubborn. They need to be right about everything, and they like really can't handle somebody trying to make them feel like they're wrong or whatever. So that's the other thing to kind of keep in mind, is that like when you meet somebody, if they're not exactly embodying the qualities that you thought they were going to embody as Sagittarius, it might be because they're embodying the shadow aspect of Sagittarius. So yeah.
Very interesting. That's really interesting.
I know, Dasom, you have to go. So thank you so much for joining. This was such an interesting topic.
Thank you so much for having me, and I learned so much today about my own my own views on things. Like you really don't know until you're probed and until you think about it. So I really wish all of us incredibly thriving relationships despite the modern challenges.
Yes. We'll have another episode when we're all married, maybe. All right, we'll see you.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Yes, astrology and relationships is probably the number one reading that you probably get from a lot of people, maybe.
Yeah, I would say that overwhelmingly most people that come to me are asking for clarification on their relationships. Um, but speaking to the conversation that we had earlier, I think it's interesting because I have noticed, and again, I'm not saying that everybody's like this, but I have noticed that younger people, who are still on this journey of self discovery, a lot of times they do come to me asking for a synastry reading, or they want to know about their love life and this and that. And it is in a very how do I say this? It's in a way that suggests that they are looking for, is this person right for me or not? And I'm going to just cut them off if it's a no. But the thing is that I don't necessarily have the power to tell you if somebody is right for you or not. I can tell you what your chart says, but I think that we should really aim to understand who somebody is before we start making all these assumptions based on their chart. Because the way that the chart works is like it blends in a way that's it can really manifest in so many different ways through behavior. So yeah, I find that to be really interesting that like young people a lot of times are coming to me looking for relationship guidance, but at the same time, um, I don't know if I don't know if I should really be saying that. I'm like saying I was about to say I don't know if they really uh, are coming with the right head for that guidance, but maybe I shouldn't say it like that because I don't want it to sound like I'm shitting on young people. But anyway, yes, overwhelmingly, a lot of people come to me for relationship.
No, I don't think it's shitting on. It's just like a different era. We don't even know what we want, honestly. Like, let's be honest, like the actual success of relationships with the younger generation, the teens, the 20s, the maybe the early 30s, we don't know. Like most of us aren't having the right relationships. Or is this the right relationship in terms of the future? Like I've seen this movie where everyone is asexual,
Uh,
or like nobody has partners. It's just like it's a partner, but it's not like a romantic partner. Like maybe the more of emotional aspects are stripped away as, the earth evolves, and technology evolves. Maybe we'll fall in love with an AI and like
yeah.
online fantasies rather than real people. So in a way, I'm like, I think the future also holds that we are going to become more individualistic and we won't crave that love from somebody else. Who knows?
Yeah.
That maybe that might bring pros and cons.
Yeah, I actually really relate to and kind of like agree with what you're saying, because the way that and this is maybe a really wild thing to say out loud, but when I think about spirituality and the fact that we are these souls inside a human body, inside like a three-dimensional vessel, this is similar to what I was saying about Venus and Neptune being like 3D love versus 5D unconditional love, right? This idea of like loving somebody without boundaries, whatever, this and that. Obviously, in the real world, you can't always do that because people, like they do things that, hurt the relationship, whatever. Um, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, I could see us evolving as, I guess, a species to the point where, we do become a little bit more individualistic in nature. I feel like we are very much in this Aquarian age where technology is starting to really like blow up, AI is starting to blow up. And like you said, even this idea of falling in love with like an AI person or AI robot. There was that movie that came out. What is it called? Her, where it talks about that type of, or it dives into that, like this virtual relationship thing, right? Um, where we kind of are a little bit more focused on our individual needs and like what it might look like to connect in an unconventional way. But it's funny because even in astrology, the thing that like that follows Aquarius is Pisces, and Pisces is transcending the human experience. It is unconditional love and compassion for other people. But like I said, that's trying to take something that's in a different dimension and bring it down here, which right now as things stand, there's so much ego that I don't know that like that's going to happen really in our lifetime. But yeah, I could see humans like evolving to the point where, you know, maybe that is something that's possible for them to not necessarily just transcend the ego, but to get to that point where they're so at home and whole within themselves truly that they are able to actually attract and commingle with someone who is in that same, I don't want to say vibration, but in that same kind of vibration. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, but I could
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, I think I've seen I forgot it was Tinder or Hinge, like some CEO saying that in the future, very soon, they're actually going to make avatars for our profile. And the future of dating is that your avatar is gonna interact with the other person's avatar, and if they match, then you can meet a real person. And I'm like, what?
Wow. Oh my God,
So
what? Wait, what
yeah.
app said that?
I forgot. It was either Hinge or Tinder, or we'll look it up. But
Yeah.
it was like a big app CEO saying that that's the future of
Wow.
their dating, and it's kind of like that Black Mirror episode. I'm not know if you saw, but it's the two men who are straight. They're married. They meet
Yeah.
in a video game and they fall in love.
Wow.
So one is like a male and a female video game character, and you can make out, do the deeds instead of the game, but it's all virtual. And they
Mm,
meet a real person, and they're like, okay, like I'm not gay, but would I fall in love with you in real person? And they don't. But in the virtual game, they do. So it's
mm.
like love, romantic, passion is very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really contributes. That's so interesting, by the way. I've seen Black Mirror, but I haven't seen that episode, so maybe I'll have to watch it. Um, but I think that's interesting because it sort of reminds me of, like I just said, the different aspects of astrology um that are present when it comes to like compatibility. You could have like Venus being reciprocal attraction and like mental connection, but then the moon being something more emotional, and then Mars being something more physical. And like all these things are represented differently. So maybe like you connect with somebody really emotionally, but physically you don't feel desire for them. Like physical, sexual, intimate desire like that, like you just don't feel it, for example, or it's not really that strong to the point where you actually feel like it drives you to want to know somebody more deeply. Or maybe like, you know, you connect with somebody in a very spiritual kind of way, like a very Neptunian type of way, but mentally you feel like I don't really know that there's a really equal exchange in a way that actually feels good to me. Or maybe we don't really have those types of conversations that really stimulate my mind, for example, right? But all these things are like different in astrology, and I think that can sort of encompass like the complex nature of connection. Like I think we want in our heads connection to be very straightforward, very black and white, like just master this thing and you're good to go. But I think it's actually quite complex, like you're saying.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow. So talking about that, I wanted to talk about like the recent thought that I had.
Yeah.
I don't know if the universe is testing me. You could let me know what you think. But, you know, when I was in love with somebody, I was like, yeah, when I was in love with somebody before that, I thought, you know, I'm never going to get married. Like, I want to fulfill all my dreams. But when I fell in love, it's like you would drop everything and let me be a trad wife for them. So I thought, hey, maybe like I am 30 now, like 30s now, so I want to like get married and have kids, blah blah blah, like find somebody that actually has everything in terms of like the house, the car, the white picket fence, whatever. So I feel like I've met, you know, a couple men who had that. They're like, I'm ready to settle down, like I am intentional, but I wasn't attractive to them
Mm.
emotionally or physically. So I know I told early in this episode I would like to think logically first what I want and then to talk about emotional. So in a way, maybe the universe did show me, hey, here's a guy that you wanted. Like the you know, the white picket fence. And I'm like, no, I don't think I could ever see myself emotionally attached to this person. So now I'm in this era, like I said, of I don't know what I want. This partnership that I thought isn't exactly black and white. So, is it even possible to find the perfect person for you that has everything that you want, emotional, physical, financial, everything? I don't know. Am I asking for too much? Or is it just not your time yet? A lot of questions in my head.
Wow. I totally like appreciate you for saying that, because I feel like I personally, maybe not now, but at some point I feel like I have definitely wondered the same thing, right? Like, is it really like, namely, is it really possible to find somebody who you connect with and that fires on all those cylinders, right? You're attracted to them physically, emotionally you connect, spiritually you connect, mentally everything's there. Like, is that really possible? Um I think it is, actually. But I think there are certain things that I think there are certain things, though. There are, I don't want to say conditions. There are nuances here, though. If you expect, not you, any person, myself included, expects to find somebody that I am attracted to in all of those ways, and it's 100 at every single one of them, I don't necessarily know that that's possible, because that's then asking for like perfection.
Yeah.
Like, 100 out of 100 on every single thing. Okay, well, let's be honest. Like, I don't even know that I reach that meter for somebody else. I do think it's possible, but I think there are times when, for example, you might not notice like a certain, like one of those aspects right away. And it might take time to build that. Just to give an example, right? I have heard that for men pursue based off of like physical attraction, in the sense that if they look at a woman and they find her physically attractive, they are more likely to actually like pursue that, want to get to know her, strike up a conversation with her, ask her on a date. But if they don't even feel any type of physical, like, wow, she's attractive, she's hot, she's whatever, then the chances of them actually making any type of move, even if it's small, are like very, very slim. Whereas for women, sometimes, yes, they will be approached by a man, or even approach a man themselves and be attracted to them physically, and then see how it develops. But many other times women are maybe not as physically attracted to a man as they would hope that they would be, or they expected themselves to be, whatever, but they like his energy, they whatever. And then over time, as they build an emotional connection with him, the physical attraction grows. I have been in that situation before, actually. So personally, I can say, like, yeah, that resonates with me. I don't know if this is just like, if this is actually proven, or if this is just what people are theorizing. But I do think that that's like another thing to take into consideration, is that sometimes, like, it might take time for you to notice certain other aspects of your connection with somebody that aren't initially present. I also think for myself, I've noticed this, but also for like some of my clients that I've worked with, that if there are certain things in your life that you haven't really like rectified or fully claimed for yourself, you are more likely to seek that out in another person. So, for example, if you are somebody who, like, you don't have a thriving career, or any type of mission, because you don't have to have a thriving career to be in a relationship, by the way, I'm just saying. But there's not another like kind of mission that you're working toward, or something else that you do that occupies your time. Like, for example, you may be more inclined to seek out a partner who's very, very wealthy materially, because they provide that for you when you don't have that for yourself. And so you still may find that attractive, but because of being in a place where you don't have that for yourself, it's even more attractive to you that somebody has that quality. Same thing. If emotionally you are somebody who struggles to like regulate yourself emotionally, or you just struggle a lot with your emotions and you need a lot of emotional support, and this and that, or whatever the situation is, right? You may find people who are somewhat like very nurturing and emotional people to be more attractive, because that's something that you know that you struggle with, or that you seek through another person. Now, I think that as people, we naturally are designed to connect over things. It's not to say that like you need to have everything in your life perfect before you can get into a relationship. That's not at all what I'm saying. But I have just noticed that I think part of that process of discovering who you are and what you want also can come through healing certain things, or certain wounds, or working on certain aspects of yourself, so that when you meet another person, you aren't seeking that in someone else. You have it for yourself, and you can say, like, this is what I know I bring to the table. This is who I am as a person. how does that like play with yours? And there's no risk that you might, I hate to use the word settle, but there's no risk, or there's less of a risk that you might settle or commit to something that isn't actually in alignment with you, but it's more out of whether it's desperation or just a desire for something that you don't have. I think is another thing to consider.
Right. So to wrap it up, is there anything you would like to touch? Maybe in astrology with relationships, or any maybe recent stories or things that you've learned.
Like one of the most valuable things that I've learned in relationships up to this point is like how important it is to really trust yourself and like listen to yourself. And if there's some reason why you feel like you can't trust your own intuition or trust your own decisions, then doing whatever inner work is necessary to get yourself to that point is going to be really crucial. Because I think this day and age, especially with social media as well, we all want like love and connection. We all, yes. But I think there can also be a tendency to like always be asking somebody else, what do you do about this situation? Like, what should I do about this? What do you think about this guy and this and that? Whether it's your friends or it's like you go on social media and it's just bombarding you with like, this IG therapist says this, and then this tarot reader says this, and like this, I don't know, thought leader says this, and the president says this. And now you're like, oh my gosh, what is it? Like thinking about things like attachment styles that became really, really popular over the past few years, to see that being talked about all over the place. But then it gets to the point where you see it so much that, and you see different versions of it on different accounts, that you start to really question and wonder to yourself, like, wow, it seems like no matter how I do this, like I'm doing something wrong. Or, what does this actually look like in real life, So I think listening to yourself, listening to your intuition is really important, and finding a balance between, leaning on your friends and other people, therapists, whoever, for support. But, like I said, also balancing that with like listening to yourself. Because the other thing too is that some people don't always maybe have your best intentions when they're giving their opinion, or it might not even be that sinister. It's just that they're giving you advice or their perspective, but it's through the lens of their experience. And I know I've experienced that before as well, with people who I can tell that what they're saying to me is like what their higher self is saying to them, which I might still need to hear, by the way. It's just important to like really understand, I think, the difference there. So yeah, that's one thing. I don't know, is there anything that you've learned, anything that you've learned, or any like last piece of advice that you would give?
I totally love that one because whenever I go into my TikTok, Instagram, it's feeds about relationship experts, relationship professionals giving you ABCD advice. Oh, if he's doing this, if he's not texting, blah, 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 you should leave, which
Yeah.
is valid truth.
Right.
But then you start to lose your own compass of what's going on in your situation. So I feel like listening to too many advices, you become a robot. Like, who are you? What do you want to do at this moment? It's great to get advice from your friends, but I am trying to trust my own intuitions um, in all aspects of life. But of course, there are times when you're lost and you need to use that tool to give you that guidance and navigation. But I think there's too much content these days. So we're kind of losing ourselves. So yeah, I like your advice. Come back to yourself. What is your intuition and guts telling you, not an algorithm?
Mm.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much to Dasom, and see you guys next time.